fundamentally, it is a peace negotiation at the moment, which seems to be pressuring only one side, and that side is the Ukrainians. Although, as you just pointed out, Trump has put, President Trump has said, Putin's got to stop with his attacks. I mean, the whole point is that Putin's been able to continue his attacks for weeks while the negotiations are going on, claiming he wants peace while increasing the tempo and pace of war. So there's an obvious disconnect. What Trump should have said is immediately to Putin, if you're serious about peace, stop the fighting, and then we'll talk about where the end goes. I've never seen a situation where you move straight to the end point without a ceasefire first. Every side you've got, if you're serious about peace, you need to, end the fighting first. At that point, you can sit down and start negotiating. What we're getting at the moment, though, is Putin able to attack at will. He's able to kill civilians whenever he wants to, and there's no pressure being put on him to give any concessions up. All the pressure is going to Ukraine. That's not going to achieve a sustainable peace.
Is a blind eye being turned to some of these horrific airstrikes with the object of getting a deal done necessarily? Because again, I go back to the point which I think we agree on in terms of the sequencing of this just not appearing to be correct and not being of help to the Ukrainian people who are being bombed, including those airstrikes last night.
Yeah, look, I think, as always, atrocities do have a momentum of their own when it comes to wars. Like, you can look at many different wars in history when a certain atrocity, the killing of civilians, in a certain number, has led to a dramatic transformation of international opinion. Now, Putin probably hasn't gone there yet to the level you would need. I refer, for example, to, if you remember, the Srebrenica bread line massacre, things like that back in the Bosnian War. That made a massive impact. Of course, it changed internationally. Now it only takes one such thing, Putin killing 50, 60 civilians rather than, say, 8, 12. It's terrible to talk in those terms. I mean, 8, 12 is disastrous. But it's the level of how this looks and acts, and you could see a big transformation. But certainly he's not been pressured by Trump to date to stop his attacks. If he had been, I'm pretty sure he'd have stopped it. That's the amazing thing. Trump's got a lot of power at his disposal here. And if he was serious about pushing Putin, I think Putin would have to give him something to show that Putin would stay in his good books. But right now, that's not been asked for. It's a mistake, in my view.
What do you think peace will look like in Ukraine? What is your prediction, and what would you like it to look like?
Well, I'd like it to look like the Russians retreat back to their border in 2014, and they acknowledge they did wrong. They paid for Ukrainian reconstruction, and that was that. That's not obviously what is likely to happen under the current circumstance. The best case scenario, and the one realistic, I think the Ukrainians understand this, is that they don't have to give away territory permanently in the sense of saying we are ceding territory. There may be some kind of deal worked out where some areas of Ukraine pre the war are administered by neutral forces or something of that kind, that there is going to be a determination of those areas along the line. But also, crucially, they are free to join NATO, they're free to join the European Union, and as well that any deal agreed will be underpinned not simply by European security guarantees, but crucially by the Americans. Because if that happens, then you have a chance of peace actually lasting. I think if you don't have that security guarantee, and if you have an unfair peace levied on Ukraine, firstly, it emboldens Putin if he's given what he wants, basically. It goes, well, I'll come back for some more a bit later. And equally, Ukraine will not be satisfied with that. How could you be if your territory had been given away unfairly to another party? You would have to obviously consciously try and get it back. And there's a great example of this. If you look in Europe, the constant fights between France and Germany from 1870 onwards, when the French ceded Alsace and Lorraine to Germany at the end of that war, the 1870 war, what happened? They spent the next 30, 40, 50 years, revanchism in mind. And when the Germans had to cede territory at the end of the First World War, what happened? It paved the way for Hitler, ultimately. So these things don't work if people feel they're unfair, ultimately.
I wonder
you need to have a fair settlement.